What's going on, everybody? It is that time again. The Sooners Illustrated Podcast, episode 120 on this Thursday, October 17th, 2024. Josh Callaway, Collin Kennedy, with you on a Thursday. Got a couple of recruiting notes to hit with our guy, Collin Kennedy here. Updates on a couple of 2025 prospects Oklahoma's looking to add onto the board that are going to be in town this weekend. We'll break that down a little bit. Oklahoma's quarterback situation, kind of up in the air. Brent Venables had some interesting comments on Tuesday. Collin and I are going to break that all down, how we think Oklahoma should handle that spot, at least this week and kind of moving forward. Of course, Collin's here. We're going to get his thoughts on the game this weekend. Oklahoma, South Carolina, get his pick. And then James E. Jackson will be along at the back end of the show for a little in-state recruiting talk as well. So a nice Thursday show for you. Send you on your way into your mid-October weekend, a very important weekend for Oklahoma on the field. And we'll talk about that a little bit in just a bit. But CK, let's start with, obviously, this weekend back at home, which means, obviously, some visitors are going to be coming into town for the Sooners. They host South Carolina on Saturday morning. Going to be a whiteout game. It's homecoming. Crowd, you would think, might be a little, I don't know if flat's the right word, but coming off the Texas game, maybe a little needs to get revved up. But it's just, I would imagine, still will be a really good atmosphere on Saturday. Let's talk about some guys that are going to be there. First off with Kaleb Burns. So Kaleb Burns, a 2025 three-star linebacker who we talked about a couple times, currently a Baylor commit, but he's been going through this second recruitment, as Collin has called it. He visited Oregon last week, right? And now he's supposed to be in town this weekend. Where do things kind of stand in your mind with Kaleb as he is planning to make his way to Norman this weekend, obviously, here as we move into the back end of October?
Man, this is a huge weekend for Oklahoma, obviously on the field, like you mentioned, Josh, but off the field as well. I mean, they're going to have a couple of 2025 kids specifically on campus that they are targeting, and probably the most prioritized prospect remaining on the board in Kaleb Burns, set to be in town this weekend to check out this game against South Carolina. And I think it's truly a pivotal visit. Now, first and foremost, it's going to be an unofficial visit.
Yeah.
It sounds like Kaleb Burns is willing to take an official visit with Oklahoma later on in the season. That's kind of assuming that you actually get there, right? And so part of this process is going to be making sure that things go well for OU whenever Saturday 11:45 a.m. rolls around. And so the plan is obviously to roll out the red carpet. That's the exact verbiage that I got from folks around Oklahoma's program. And I think when you look at Kaleb Burns, you start with what you kind of briefly mentioned there off the top. He just visited for Oregon's game against Ohio State. A lot of people are calling that the best atmosphere that this wild college football season has ever seen. I watched that game live. I'm sure you did as well, Josh. It looked pretty electric. I know Josh Pate said that's arguably the loudest stadium he's ever been in. And Kaleb Burns was there. And not only was Kaleb Burns there for that experience, but talking to folks around him after the game, Dan Lanning, head coach at Oregon, made it a point to talk to Kaleb Burns specifically after that incredible victory over a top-ranked Buckeyes squad, somewhere in the top 2 or 3. So, yeah, man, coming off of that visit, I think Kaleb kind of took a breath and was like, okay, emotions are high. This is electric. Really enjoy the trip. Want to get back home to the Houston area and then kind of dive back into the second recruitment. And so now it's the Sooners' turn. I think Oklahoma, the atmosphere is going to be important, obviously, because like you mentioned, we don't necessarily know what the feel is going to be inside that stadium come kickoff on Saturday. And then we'll get to more of this in a second, but it's going to be a tough game. To my knowledge, this is Kaleb Burns' first experience in Norman. And I've noted on the board a couple of times, I think people in his camp are very high on the potential fit between Kaleb and Oklahoma behind the scenes. Obviously, we know OU and what this staff likes to do with its linebackers. They prioritize that position specifically. And so I think a lot of the stuff that you can check off the list before actually taking a visit is there for Oklahoma in the recruitment of Kaleb Burns. Now it's about kind of painting the full picture. Before I wrap up on Caleb, I noted this the other day in a little bit of a intel package that I put together for our subscribers. I still feel like the Baylor pledge means a lot. That being said, talking to some folks, not only is Caleb aware of how things are going for Baylor, I think that the next few weeks specifically are going to be huge because Baylor has 3 very important games in the Big 12 before hitting a bye week here pretty soon. And you have to kind of think that Dave Aranda and the Bears staff, they've got to kind of go on a run there before hitting that off week. That almost kind of feels like decision territory, right? On paper, that's kind of where administration's evaluating the future of their football program. That's usually where you're figuring out what to do with the future. And so Jamar Chaney, Baylor's linebackers coach, that's Caleb's guy. That's his favorite coach in this recruitment. I noted it the other day on the board too. I think people at Baylor on campus, but even outside of the football program, are making it well known to Caleb how much they want him to be a leader going into the next few years.
Yeah.
So Baylor is still very big in this process. Oregon may have taken the lead, if I'm quite honest with you. And so now it's up to Oklahoma, especially with everything else that's going on, to really identify where they stand in this process. Because if things don't go well, we're not even necessarily talking about whether or not Caleb could take an official visit later on in the season. It might be at a point right now where if Oklahoma is going to be a firm contender for Kaleb Burns, this unofficial on Saturday is ultimately going to determine how the Sooners stand in his recruitment.
It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. You would certainly think, Oregon is one of those programs right now that's never had a problem recruiting, obviously, but they have all this momentum right now. You just saw the game of the year so far, in that atmosphere. Oregon won the game, obviously. And then you come to Norman this weekend where things are kind of uneven right now. It's going to be an early kick. We're kind of wondering what the atmosphere is going to be like. We'll see if they can try to make up that ground. If there is ground to make up, that'll be interesting. And Collin's been all over that Kaleb Burns recruitment. So we'll be sure to continue to update that as we go along here on these 2025 prospects. So from one, obviously, priority position on defense, flipping over to offense in 2025, Austin Peay. Now, this is not a guy we've talked about a lot on the program. Offensive tackle from, American Fork, Utah, which is a heck of a hometown name. He'll be in town this weekend as well. That was reported for our Blair and Gulo earlier this week on 24/7 Sports. Talk about this guy a little bit. I mean, it's not a guy, that we've talked about on the show. So, a little bit of kind of catching up on what the player is like. But then also, from what you can gather, is this a guy that Oklahoma could potentially be getting onto the board here in 2025? Obviously, that offensive line class we've talked about a few times is loaded. Big name guys. Obviously, Michael Fasusi, the headliner, Ryan Fauché. But add another guy in here to the mix, it could really turn into the position of strength of the class, arguably, where you kind of add on Austin Peay as he gets ready to come to Norman this weekend.
Yeah, so the background on Austin Peay, and I think I've only really told this story once, but I'll reiterate for folks at home. So Austin Peay and I met in San Antonio at the National Combine before the All-American Bowl. And awesome guy, really cool kid, down to earth, but will tell you like it is.
Mm-hmm.
And what Austin Peay and I talked about at the time was, for those who don't know, he is not only from Utah, but he has several family members, including a couple of brothers, who have gone to BYU, played at BYU. I believe 1 or 2 of his brothers are currently playing for BYU as things stand today. And so with all of Austin's connections to BYU specifically, there was a point in time in his recruitment where I think a lot of people in the national landscape just felt like it was a matter of time before he went there.
Sure.
But Austin and he kind of brought it up out of the blue when we were having a conversation in our 24/7 Sports war room, for lack of a better term. On his own, he was basically saying, look, I know that there's kind of this assumption out there about me that I'm just going to go to BYU and no one else has a chance. I hate that, I believe is exactly what he said. I I really don't like that that's the narrative surrounding me. And I want to go somewhere that I feel I have the best chance to be developed and to be coached and to find the most success at the next level. And that's when I was kind of like, okay, Oklahoma's in the mix. Now, if I remember correctly, he took an unofficial visit to Oklahoma last season for the TCU game. I want to say at the very end of the year where it was like 69-45, a little chilly.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, Austin Peay visited for that game. And since then, Oklahoma's been a player here. Now, what's important about this weekend specifically, though, is he's taken 4 official visits, to my knowledge. BYU, NC State, Oregon, and Arkansas. Oklahoma would be the 5th. They are obviously the most recent official visit on his slate. And he has not been back to Oklahoma much since getting his offer at a camp, checking in for that TCU game. It's obviously hard for someone out in Utah to get to Norman, Oklahoma frequently. And so this return trip carries a lot of weight, in my opinion, because on top of that, Josh, what I wanted to mention as it relates to Austin Peay as well, I'm sure some of our subscribers and folks out there have seen some 24/7 Sports crystal balls go in regarding 5-star offensive tackle Andrew Babalola. So Andrew Babalola in Michigan, I think that the Wolverines are finally kind of picking up the steam that a lot of us have felt like behind the scenes they would inevitably find. And so if Michigan is swinging things in its direction with Andrew Babalola, and Oklahoma does want to add a 5th or 6th, depending on how you look at it, offensive lineman to this 2025 class.
Yeah.
Austin Peay could not only be that guy, he's also kind of felt like that one name that's always floated around or hovered around the 25 cycle for OU, because Bill Beanbo's been in contact. They've just never been able to iron out a visit with him. So now Austin Peay coming to town, knowing what we know and knowing what Austin thinks about his recruiting process, man, like if Oklahoma puts on a good show this weekend and he enjoys his trip, this is genuinely someone that could potentially be another addition to the 2025 group. Now, again, there's so much left to figure out. I believe Austin Peay has kind of mentioned a time or two that his timeline is roughly at the end of the year he's going to make a decision. So a few more weeks to go, certainly. But yeah, Josh, he's got a midweek game this week, and then he'll fly in for the official visit. So he'll be in Norman for a few days. And from the sounds of it, and then just kind of having the context that we have on Austin himself, I think OU's got a real shot here, and he's a really talented player. Really quick, I should add to what he looks like, who he is. 6'6", 295. That'll do the job.
Yeah.
Pretty athletic, too. He gets to the second level quick. He has like an 80-inch plus wingspan, so long-armed kid. He was borderline dominant when I saw him at the National Combine in one-on-one settings. He's got a true tackle build, but I also kind of think he could be someone that would be able to move to guard if needed because of some of that ability to reach the second level. I think he'd be very natural and gap scheme pulling or reaching to the second level in zone calls. And so Austin Peay brings a lot to the table. I think he is definitely someone that Bill Bedenbaugh kind of looks for from a skill set perspective. And he's going to be giving OU a look this weekend, man. It feels like a really big visit.
Yeah, I was wondering, coming from Utah for a 11:45 kick on Saturday, Stars kind of have to align for that. But yeah, I mean, like we said, I mean, Michael Fasusi, the headliner, Ryan Fauché, who's just been doing that, just stock up, seems like ever since he committed. Darius Afalava and Owen Hollenbeck, we've talked about before as well. I mean, you're looking at a really, really good group. It's a really good group anyway, but
you make Sean Hutton in there too.
Yes,
Sean Hutton in there as well.
For sure. So, I mean, that's a strong group. So We'll see. Obviously, Collin's been all over it, and we'll have a lot more intel for our VIP members. Oklahoma247sports.com. Leading up to the weekend, obviously coming out of it is important weekend for Oklahoma. You only get 3 of these home SEC weekends this year. This is number 2, and obviously have Alabama later. But important weekend, obviously important weekend for a lot of reasons. Like Collin kind of said, on the field, off it as well. All right, let's talk about the current team a little bit. So, we talked about this on Monday a little bit with Tom and James, kind of the quarterback spot. It was more retrospective because there was some thought, that conversation. I didn't really think of it too much at the time, frankly, but after the game, the conversation came up. Should Oklahoma have tried to insert Jackson Arnold back into the mix against Texas? Obviously, they never did that. Brent Venables said post-game he never thought about doing it. He said earlier this week, stick with Michael Hawkins. He's going to make the start on Saturday against South Carolina. He did acknowledge that the redshirt conversation with Jackson Arnold has been had, but that they do still intend to use Jackson basically if they feel like they need to or should. So, Collin, I want to get your thoughts on all this, just kind of what Oklahoma should do here, because it's an interesting conversation. I can kind of hear both sides as far as sticking with Michael Hawkins, giving Jackson Arnold another opportunity. Venables even didn't rule out playing both guys together at some point down the road, should he feel like that's the best way to handle it. He said he wasn't immune to anything, which I think is fair with the way the offense is playing right now. So I want to get your thoughts, man. I mean, it's kind of a delicate situation in today's college football. You don't want to end up running the risk of, both guys feeling like they're on the outside and, transfer portal, all that becomes a real conversation. How would you handle it if you're Oklahoma? Are you rolling with Hawkins, going back to Arnold? It's a tough spot because the offense is struggling, and you kind of talk me in either way. Where are you kind of at with it, though, as these guys try to figure out what to do on offense?
Yeah, I want to hear what you have to say as well, because I think the way that I'm thinking about it right now, I don't think there's a right answer here. Like, I think this is a very subjective situation because my opinion could be different from your opinion. Your opinion could be different from our YouTube comment section's opinion, and their opinion could be different than mine. But I don't think that matters, because what I think we would all agree on right now is that everything kind of has to be on the table when it comes to Oklahoma and this team. Every possibility has to be in play. And so where I'm at with it currently, I think they did the right thing rolling with Michael Hawkins through the rest of the game. Now, I'm not going to sit here and lie. There was a point during our live game chat where I was like, man, Jackson Arnold might have to legitimately come into this game. Mm-hmm. In retrospect, I am glad that they rolled through the outing with Michael Hawkins. I think going into this weekend, you roll with Michael Hawkins 100%, and unless things go really, really poorly, I think you have to let Hawkins do the job. Now, part of that, too, is acknowledging Jackson Arnold's situation, right? Sure. The redshirt stuff is very real. I think if and when Jackson Arnold likely hits the transfer portal following the season, assuming Michael Hawkins takes command of this job, that he would be one of the top transfer portal quarterback talents available. And I think you have to be sensitive not only to your own needs, but to his, because of what he's done for the program. But at the same time, I think what really stood out to me, Josh, Brent said something pretty profound, in my opinion, when he said Jackson wants to be the starting quarterback at the University of Oklahoma.
Sure.
And so with that in mind, my stance is you let this South Carolina game kind of be your final portion of what Brent is calling the body of work for Michael Hawkins. If Michael Hawkins goes out there and gets you a win, his job. I think this is kind of the ending of the litmus test, if you will, for the true freshman quarterback. But if things don't go well, and maybe even if they go very poorly in game, I think letting Jackson Arnold have another chance is certainly in the cards. He wants to be part of this program. He chose Oklahoma over several other contenders. And as we've now come to see, and what I'm sure you and I both talked about very many times, the quarterback position alone wasn't the problem when Jackson Arnold was in there.
Sure.
So, man, if he has a second chance, and it's a big if, because again, I think Michael Hawkins should be the guy this weekend. If he gets another chance and he gives you a chance to win, that has to at least be entertained. Because the last thing I'll say, I think everyone's going to look at this situation from a procedure standpoint. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I think, again, you have to be sensitive to all of these individual situations. But what I'm also kind of aware of, and I talked about this a little bit the other day in our VIP chat, whoever the quarterback is for Oklahoma moving forward, we're talking about right now, if things don't go well this weekend, the worst of worst case scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It doesn't matter who the signal caller is. If they lose to South Carolina and the only seemingly winnable game for OU the rest of the way is Maine, then you're talking potentially 5-7. You're talking serious offseason noise. You're talking massive changes within this program. And I think it would go well beyond the offense, right? I mean, I'm not saying everything is going to happen that maybe some folks out there are imagining, but that suddenly becomes at least a slight possibility if they don't get this stuff figured out.
Sure.
And so Michael Hawkins, in my opinion, is the guy right now, and he has earned that right. He should go into the South Carolina game. And like I said earlier, if he wins, I think you lock it down and you say, we're rolling with the true freshman. We're really going to try and see what we have here. Because he at that point would help you have 2 SEC wins, and that value cannot be understated. You want Jackson Arnold to be able to have his level of freedom if he does, and I think we would all assume, choose to explore other opportunities. But also where I'm at is at the end of the day, you have to find a way to win this game this weekend. And however, whoever, whatever gets that done, I think at the quarterback position, you at least have to consider all expectations and potential paths.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's a conversation. I do think you stick with Michael Hawkins for now. He did play well, in the second half against Tennessee, and obviously did enough in the Auburn game to get the job done. Texas, it was not pretty. But to be fair to Mike as well, he hasn't had his top 5 wideouts for even a snap, right? I mean, since he came in from Tennessee, Deion Brooks was already hurt. He hasn't ever been back. Don't know if he's going to be back this week. He was ruled questionable on the Wednesday night availability reports. That's up in the air right now. He's still a true freshman, kind of going through some growing pains. I still certainly believe in Jackson Arnold's ability and think he has a chance to be a really good quarterback still. So I think it's a conversation. I don't think that, depending kind of like you're saying, how this goes, I think that turning back to Jackson is a viable and realistic option. But what I will say, and I kind of touched on this on Monday a little bit, whatever they are going to do, you got to kind of stick with it. I'm not really a fan of the back and forth of it. If you go back to Jackson, I think you got to stick with him. And it's his season, it's his team, and let the chips fall where they may the rest of the year. And then after the season's over, you kind of figure out what's our path forward from here. Because I think the back and forth musical chairs is not the way to go. And that's how you run the risk of maybe losing both guys when it's all said and done. And then you're kind of sitting there saying, what do we do now? So I think you stick with Michael Hawkins for now, but I do believe it's a conversation and that Jackson should be ready, even on Saturday, frankly. If the first half is more the same, they're getting blanked, I think you make a switch. I do, so, time is of the essence here, urgency to figure this thing out ASAP. Because like you said, you got to win this game. You lose this game, you're looking at the rest of the season saying, where are the wins? Sans Maine. So it's a conversation. And I will, just because I know it'll get brought up, I don't think the Casey Thompson thing is really viable. I know fans will bring that up and they'll say, why not give the 7th-year guy a look? And I'm not saying it's completely ridiculous to suggest it by any means, but, Casey, with his injury history, you wonder where that mobility is with the state of the offensive line. And you're trying to win games now, obviously, but you're also trying to figure out the future of your program and the position. The reality is Casey's not going to be here after this year. So I don't know if Oklahoma truly believes he's the best guy, he's our best chance to win. Sure. But I think it's kind of, I don't know if that's necessarily the case, and you might as well kind of prepare for the future too. So I don't know if that's really a realistic option as well. There's no easy answer though. I mean, I could be talking anything. I mean, when the offense is 43 points in the Cotton Bowl, I could be talking to a lot of things. So, we'll see, I guess.
Like I said, I think everything's got to be on the table, and I don't think there's a right answer. I really don't. And the bottom line as well is the folks in-house know a lot more than we all do about how that situation needs to play out. So I have a lot of trust in that group figuring out what the best path is for everyone involved. But man, at the end of the day, and I can't overstate this enough because it's what's at the top of my mind right now. Like I don't really care who's out there or what's going on. And I don't really care what's happening in a few months or who you could potentially lose. Because if you lose this game, we're talking about a lot of stuff that I don't think anyone wants to talk about. Right. I think that's the best way that I can put it. So we'll see, man. It sounds like you're against the 2 quarterback thing though.
Yeah, I don't love it. I mean, like Brent Venables said, I mean, I don't think Oklahoma's really in a position to say like we're not going to try something, but I don't know. You like it? I mean, obviously, we've seen teams do it. I mean, teams have done it before. I mean, Brent Venables talked about it. Steve Spurrier had done it many times in the past. I mean, kind of just playing 2 guys. I feel like it's kind of weird when you do. Who was doing that earlier this year? It was Michigan, right? That was Davis Warren and Alex Orji were just going back and forth like by the drive, literally.
Yep.
I mean, you could try if it really push come to shove, you could try that and just if one guy has the hot hand, roll with it, I guess. But like I said, I feel like you stick with Hawkins to give him a little more rope. But if you feel the need to make the move, you make it and you stick with it. I don't see a world where you go Arnold and then you go back to Hawkins again. It's like you kind of just have to, I think, make a decision and ride it. But
yeah, and it would be potentially different as well if there was a stark difference in skill sets or experience level or whatever else, like some sort of contrasting quality that would justify the 2 quarterback action. I would hear out, but like Michael Hawkins and Jackson Arnold are relatively similar players as things stand today. So I'm with you. You can't do the waffling thing.
Yeah.
With everything that's at stake. And I think where I also come down with it is, man, like what's the advantage that you would get? Right?
Sure.
Like, those programs that do the 2 quarterback thing, they say, well, this guy gives us the legs, this guy gives us the arm, this guy has the experience, this guy has promise. I don't see the advantage on paper differing between the 2, and that's why I think Michael Hawkins, man, it's his show until things go awry potentially. And I'm very excited to see what Michael Hawkins does with this opportunity because I think he's earned it, and I think that he hasn't opened the door very much for any of that stuff. But we'll see, man. I can't wait to see this game because I have no idea what can happen. And I don't think any of us expected this much to be on the line when South Carolina came to town.
For sure. I will say, too, I mean, for what it's worth, a lot of credit to Jackson, too. I mean, he's, by all accounts, been very engaged. Is still working hard. Like he said, Brent Venables said at the press conference, he still wants to be the quarterback here. In today's college football, it would have been pretty easy after 4 games to be like, all right, I'm shutting it down. I'm going to save this year. And, I want to, see what my options are after the season. The fact that he still wants to get out there and is still in the running to maybe be the quarterback, I mean, it says a lot about him. So,
yeah. We'll and I think to hammer home that point, I am of the belief right now in some of the conversations that I've had that Jackson Arnold would have a substantial market if Oh,
I
I
would
mean,
think
we're
so.
talking some big name programs that would likely be already trying to make that stuff happen behind the scenes. And so I think it says a lot about him that he hasn't come out publicly or that hasn't leaked
Mhm.
out and he hasn't shut it down yet. I think it's very interesting.
Right.
I give props to both of these guys, man. This is tough. It's a tough situation
They're
for
young,
both
man.
Michael and Jackson. And
Yeah,
you consider the surroundings and the stakes, and this is hard. This is
for
hard with these
sure.
two young guys. I give them a lot of props.
No, I would think that, yeah, the market for Jackson would be very nice. And, frankly, I mean, I was gonna say the rest of the year plays out, but a world where if he does end up leaving, ends up in the right situation and he just pops off next year, completely believable for me, feasible, the right situation. So
Absolutely.
I still think he's a really good quarterback. I know it didn't go well, the turnovers, but I still have a lot of belief there. But we'll see. It could be interesting, like you said. It could be interesting. Before you go, I do want to get your thoughts on the game, though, as far as how it's going to go. I mean, who knows, right? I mean, it's up in the air big time. I mean, the last few games have felt like this. Like, what the heck's going to happen? Your thoughts on the matchup, and obviously we'll get your pick as well before you go. But it's we'll have the game preview tomorrow, but it's South Carolina is good. They're
Yeah.
underrated. They're only 3-3, which is not going to pop off the page. And there's these other big games coming up. This is the only SEC game that Oklahoma has the rest of the way that's not against a team that's ranked right now. So that's this natural inclination to maybe kind of be like, this is the gettable one, and it is winnable, and that Oklahoma can win the game. They're favored, but South Carolina's playing good ball. I mean, where are you kind of at with this matchup and confidence level that OU can do this, or is it going to be disaster mode, frankly, if they lose?
Well, I think where I want to start is this South Carolina team, in my opinion, is a few bounces of the ball away from being a ranked team. I think
Right.
considering what they put together in those games against LSU, Alabama, I mean, the way that I look at it right now, whatever the general public's opinion is of South Carolina, arguably double it. I mean, they are far better than what I think a lot of people perceive them to be as things stand today. Shane Beamer and that staff, they're doing a really good job. Brent talked about it a little bit. They're probably playing some of the best defense that they've played there in a really long time. I like some of the stuff that they do offensively. I think Lenora Sellers is another. I almost look at Lenora Sellers as almost like a Michael Hawkins, Jackson Arnold type, and that he's a young redshirt freshman quarterback, who has dealt with some adversity out of the gate, is going through some growing pains, and yet he is at a time or two helped South Carolina get into winnable positions. And so my view of the South Carolina team is that there are, again, a few different outcomes away from being another ranked SEC opponent for the Sooners, and they have a very real chance to beat Oklahoma in Norman this weekend. But this is the season. I mean, this for Oklahoma is chips to the center of the table. There's no tomorrow type stuff. I mean, we're talking you win this game, or kind of like I mentioned earlier, the worst of worst case scenarios could be coming to the forefront. Because I don't want to talk about it too much, but man, like some of those voices that are out there that are having conversations about more than just the offense, those voices get louder, and they get a lot more kind of wind behind them if you lay an egg at home against what a lot of people will see as a winnable SEC matchup. And then you're talking a less than ideal outcome as it relates to the program their first year in the SEC. You're talking about in-season changes potentially. I mean, everything could be on the table depending on how this goes. So I look at this as the season for Oklahoma. You do whatever it takes to try and win this game. And I've said it on the show before, some might look at gimmicky play calling or trick plays as cheap or a loss of pride. I don't care. If I'm in that program, man, I'm saying,
Yeah,
let's go watch every crazy play. Let's go think of every possible outcome we can think of, and let's try and build it into our game plan this weekend because, man, Josh, like the things we could be talking about if they lose this game to South Carolina come next week.
for sure.
And I'm not talking just like on field or coaching staff stuff. I mean, we'd be going down a rabbit hole if Oklahoma doesn't find a way to win this game.
100%. It's a massive game. It's a fork in the road, all those types of things. And we'll have the game preview tomorrow. Come before you go, though. I got to get your pick. What do you think here for this thing? Oklahoma, South Carolina. Like I said, OU is a slight home favorite. But, man.
Yeah, what is it? Is it still 3.5, 4?
Something like that. I haven't checked it. I think 3.5 last I saw, but I haven't looked at it today.
Are they scoring more than 3.5 points? Go ahead and hit me now.
That's the thing.
I mean,
that's the thing.
All right. I look at this game, and hear me out on this because I think you might agree. I look at this game as the home version of the Auburn game.
Mm-hmm.
I think South Carolina is a team, and it's a offense that could lend to some mistakes, especially in a road environment. I think Oklahoma is going to have a lot built in to throw at a young quarterback. And while I think that South Carolina defense, especially on the defensive line, is really, really good, I think OU finds some ways to try and neutralize the pass rush or whatever else. And then defensively for Oklahoma, I think there's a very real opportunity for success, especially with your home crowd likely behind you.
Sure.
And so I look at the South Carolina game again as kind of like the home edition of what we saw on the road at Auburn. Give me 16-13. Sooners with a walk-off field goal, courtesy of Tyler Keltner.
There we go.
And you escape with a victory, and all hope is not lost. I think Oklahoma has a real opportunity to win this game. Again, I think South Carolina is a better football team than people realize, but I still see some winning elements in there at OU, and I think that kind of comes to fruition this weekend, being back at home.
You're interesting, and James, Tom, myself will preview it tomorrow morning, and we'll give our picks then. So hope you tune into the game preview on every Friday morning on the YouTube channel and the podcast feed. CK, appreciate you as always. We'll catch up with you next week and figure out. We'll be talking, looking ahead to Ole Miss, and that game could be, that's a lot of the energy going into that game. It's a wide gap based off what happens this weekend. So we'll catch up with you next Thursday.
Always fun. Hope y'all join us at SoonersIllustrated.com. Hop on the VIP board. Everyone be safe. If you're going out to Norman this weekend, enjoy the game, and I will see y'all next week.
100%. All right, let's get James E. Jackson here for a little in-state recruiting talk to wrap up the show. All right, we now welcome on James E. Jackson onto the program. Comes on Thursdays to do a little in-state recruiting talk. James, so let's first get into what you wanted to bring up. Katie Jones, running back from Jenks. Obviously, we talked about a few times here and there. OU legacy, things like that. 3-star prospect, powerhouse program up there in Tulsa. How's things going with him? And obviously, his season in Jenks always in the mix there up in T-Town, up in 6A1. How are things kind of going on with him as Oklahoma obviously pursues him? A big piece of that 2026 in-state class.
Yeah, I mean, he's been one of the prospects that we've been keeping an eye on for quite some time because, as you said, he's a legacy guy and things like that. And we were all out in Dallas, getting ready for the River Rivalry on Friday, so we missed a lot of games in Oklahoma. And he just had a phenomenal game. I mean, he had 13 carries, 208 yards, and 3 touchdowns against a very good Mustang team, which shows, once again, why we think here at 24/7 Sports he's the best running back in the state of Oklahoma. He has that type of production. Like, to do it against that team is very, very good. Now, obviously, he has the OU legacy situation going on, but obviously his options are still open and things like that. He's going to a Louisville visit this weekend as well, so he'll be out there checking Louisville out. I mean, he's one of those guys that can pretty much has the options to go anywhere he wants. So we'll see what happens with him. But really wanted to point out the type of game that he had in Jinx because, that team is trying to get back on track here. They had a slow start with a very difficult non-district schedule. And so that was the type of performance they needed. So you can see that he's a guy that can be, a spring starter or somebody that can help this team out a lot. So it was good to see that from him as we talk about more, teams around the state and things like that.
Sure. No, and he's a guy too. We've seen, a camp at OU during the summers and dynamic player. Obviously, I think most fans in the state are probably at least vaguely familiar with him. And obviously, his dad played at Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
He's a big time player. He's a running back at Jinx, and he's putting up big numbers. He's about what you would think he would be.
Mm-hmm.
Like we talked about before, I mean, the 2025, the top end guys in the state, the vast majority of them are committed places. Katie Jones, obviously, in 2026. But there's some 2027 guys I know that you wanted to kind of bring up. And, it's kind of one of those. There's 2027 is like a made up year, it feels like, but they're coming up down the pike. Another really good class starting to form for, in-state guys. Who are some 2027 names that, have caught your eye, so far? It's still in the early going here for them, but names that Oklahoma fans should at least be aware of in the state that could be sooner soon down the road.
Yeah, it's one of those things like 2027 sounds so far away, but it's like this is their sophomore year. And it seems like there's a trend in Oklahoma where these guys are committing by their junior year.
Yeah.
Like we're seeing it. We saw it with 2025. We're seeing it with 2026. So the 2027 is something that you kind of want to keep an eye on, which is kind of where I'm going with this because there's some two really good defensive backs in the state of Oklahoma and Bryson Brown from Owasso and Samaj Stanford from Jinx. Like those two guys are some people that you really want to pay attention to, especially if you're an Oklahoma, fan and things like that, because they have some ties. I mean, they have some interests, here and there. So you really want to watch out for them. They're both 5'11", 6 feet tall. So they're the stature that you really want to see that Jay Villar's really been going after lately. And they just been playing really well. Now it's their sophomore year. So for both of these guys, it's like the first times being the go-to starter and things like that,
Sure.
and seeing those type of opportunities, but they've proven themselves. And Bryson Brown specifically, he's had some really good offers as of late. He's got the Penn State offer. He's got the OU offer. There's more teams that are really interested in him, like Texas A&M, even Georgia's been looking at him. So he's one of those guys you really got to pay attention to because he's on the rise. But I do think Oklahoma could be play a really big factor in his recruitment late for him, whenever he gets to that point in time, because as I said, they already have the stature that you want in a defensive back, a 6-foot guy playing that position. And they have the athletic ability, both of those guys. And you're seeing it now with the season they're putting together. Owasso might go undefeated this year, Josh. I honestly think that the hardest part of their schedule is past them, I think. So we'll see what happens with them. They're really impressive going forward.
100%, and we've talked about it before, but it just kind of seems like the talent in the state of Oklahoma, it's just like it gets better and better with each year. You're seeing more and more guys going D1. And for a long time, it kind of felt like the best guys either just went to OU or they went to OSU. And that was kind of the way it was. It's like every year seeing more guys leaving, to go to other SEC programs. Like it's just the talent is very, very deep. And it looks like 2026, 2027, going to be more of the same after this 25 class, which is as good as Oklahoma's had maybe ever. Really, really deep and loaded.
Yep.
Before you go, I do want to bring up a little bit of softball stuff. I mean, you've been all over the softball recruiting side of it as well. Obviously, that team's in the midst of their fall ball right now, doing the battle series and all that kind of good stuff. But it seems like they've been adding players every couple of days as well on the recruiting side of it. I know you've been staying on top of it, in-state players, how they've been doing. Their postseason's going on right now. So a little softball catch-up for us for, OU softball fans who are looking ahead to that season, which is, going to be before you know it in February.
Yeah, I mean, softball added just another pitcher just a couple of days ago. She goes by EK, another nickname type of player, which usually that means they're really, really good. She's like number 2, in a couple of rankings around the nation. So she's one of those players. It's like, man, they got another pitcher in that 2026 class because as I talked about last week, I went to see Keegan Baker from Evan Memorial. I mean, she's a pitcher in the 2026 class, and she was talking about all the other players and the other pitcher that she thought she was going to be battling it out with. There's another one coming in now. Keegan Baker, she's nothing to slight because like when I was out there, she had a 9 strikeout game. Like she was that good and helping them win that regional final in that tournament. So they're going to the state tournament now too, starting today actually on Thursday. So we'll see what happens with her. And then I want to shout out Alyssa Parker, man. Like I don't know if you
Yeah,
saw it last week, but a perfect game in the first round of the state tournament. That is incredible.
not
17
bad.
strikeouts, Josh. Like
Yeah.
there's only 7 innings in softball. So like 17 of 21 outs were strikeouts from her. So like they're not even getting a chance to play out there, her defender. So like it's
Getting
incredible
bored.
what
Yeah.
she's doing out there. I mean, she's like I said, she's going to be one of those players that probably going to be the greatest women's athlete out of Pensacola on the softball and basketball side because she's helped them to state championships in both sports so
Yeah.
far. But she's that type of athlete that OU is going to get, next season. Like she is that good. Like I can't wait to see what she does for this program because all OU needs is pitching. I mean, they obviously always have the versatile players that they need. They get a pitcher like her and the other ones they bring in, EK, Keegan Baker, the other ones down the line, like the Finch girl as well. Like there's so much talent coming in to this program. It's going to be really fun.
100%. They just reload year after year, and it's an embarrassment of riches the fact that you have this much talent in the state to pick from as well. And obviously, we know how well they do in the portal, things like that as well. So that machine's not slowing down anytime soon. It would not appear.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, appreciate you as always. Good stuff as per usual. We'll be back again Friday morning for the game preview. James, Tom, myself, to completely set the stage for Oklahoma, South Carolina. So keep an eye out. That'll be on the YouTube channel, the podcast feed, 10 a.m. every Friday morning on game week. So keep an eye out for that. Appreciate Collin Kennedy earlier for all his great input as per usual. That's it for now. For James E. Jackson, Collin Kennedy, like I said, I'm Josh Callaway. Signing off for now. We'll see you right back here tomorrow for the game preview and then Monday for the next edition of the Sooners Illustrated podcast.